So it'll be my pleasure now to introduce a leader who has been at the forefront of housing initiatives across the entire Commonwealth. He's been working to ensure that our state responds in collaboration with our communities to address our housing challenges. He's also working particularly to ensure that our communities have all the tools and resources that they need to meet the needs of people who are in the Commonwealth. So please join me now in welcoming Ed Augustus, the Secretary of the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. Secretary Augustus has championed the Affordable Homes Act, which will expand housing opportunities across the Commonwealth. Today, he's going to share his insights on the state's next steps to unlock housing production and address the housing challenges that so many of us in this region face. Secretary, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Jenny, for that introduction. Thank you all for giving me a few moments tonight to talk to you a little bit about what we're working on in the Healy Driscoll administration, hopefully to support all of your efforts at the local level to bring some relief to this housing crisis that we're experiencing, not only here in northern Middlesex County, but across the Commonwealth and really across the country. I spent a lot of time traveling the state, really from one end to the other, and everywhere I go, I hear about the undersupply of housing, the lack of affordable places to live that are impacting our communities. It's not just from housing advocates, it's from business leaders, hospital leaders, municipal employees. It's become so expensive to live here. Even our municipal workers are having difficulty finding housing. And young people entering the job market are having difficulty finding their first apartment or certainly buying their first home. Here in Lowell, the median rent is now $2,300 a month. Head over to Western and it climbs to $3,100. But in Massachusetts, we're not just admiring the problem. It really is a supply and demand issue that we need more housing. So the question is, what are we doing about it? We're developing the first statewide housing plan in over 40 years. The plan will include a housing needs assessment that leverages key supply and demographic data to analyze our housing insufficiencies by region across the state. Because we recognize that housing needs may look a little different from one community to the next. For example, we know that here in northern Middlesex region, 1 out of 4 renters are spending more than half of their income on rent and utilities. And only 1.1% of the homes are available for sale or rent. That vacancy rate is unbelievably tight. A healthier housing ecosystem will be somewhere between 4 and 5%. This plan will identify our future housing needs by region, what types of housing we need to accommodate our diverse communities, and the levels of affordability we need to make Massachusetts more competitive. The plan will outline strategies for housing production and growth, and highlight how we are going to implement and fund and build more housing. The work of the Housing Advisory Council is instrumental to identifying how we move forward. And I'd also like to highlight an important work that we're doing with the Augustus Housing Production Commission. The commission is working on advising the administration of how we can remove barriers to housing production and increase the supply of housing across the state. And I want to give a special shout out to Jenny, who is a member of that commission, that has been working hard over the last year. A phenomenal number of hours have gone into identifying what are some of the challenges that continue to get in the way of housing production, looking at everything from modular and manufactured housing. Why hasn't that industry really well reached here in Massachusetts in a way that has in other parts of the country? Are there regulatory barriers or obstacles from that part of the solution from taking root here in Massachusetts? So the commission is looking at things like that. So what kind of regulatory regulations are we promulgating as a state that get in the way of housing production. Maybe looking at things like, should we have a housing impact analysis before we issue regs to make sure we're being very thoughtful about regulations, whether they be environmental regulations or any kind of state regulation that might inhibit the production of housing across the Commonwealth. So this commission is doing very good work. It is submitting its recommendations to the governor at the first of the year. And our hope is that that commission's work might turn into some executive orders by the governor to remove some of those barriers, and some maybe in a future piece of legislation that would be recommended to the legislature at the start of the next session. But it is important that we continue the work of removing those barriers. One important tool, and I know all of the communities in this area have or will be grappling with the MBTA and Communities Act and implementation of that act. We think this is an important part of the strategy to really spur housing production. 177 communities are covered by the act. And, we hear a lot about the communities that have decided either not to move forward or struggle to move forward. But I'll tell you that 84 communities have already passed the zoning changes necessary in order to comply with the law. And those are often difficult, challenging debates, discussions at the local level, but they complied with the law, and more importantly, they removed some of the barriers to housing production, particularly multifamily housing. And the good news is the law has already worked. In those communities that have already created those zoning changes, we have 2,400 units of housing in the pipeline to be produced in those new communities. 2,400 units that otherwise wouldn't be made possible without the changes with the MBTA communities law. And we have a number of other communities that are working their way through as we come up on the deadline for some at the end of this year, and then the small adjacent communities have another year going forward. So we really see full implementation of the MBTA Communities Act as a critical strategy to unlocking housing production, helping remove some of those local barriers that have often inhibited the production of housing at the local level. If you look at the challenges that we face in terms of getting employees to be able to work proximate to their jobs, one of the big challenges is some communities have virtually built no housing. They created barriers, and they've been very effective at creating some of those barriers. Now, we need every community to do something, not just some communities to do everything. And too often, we've seen some communities really embrace housing production and do a lot of the work that benefits all of it, the surrounding communities, by allowing the production of housing. But when you look at places like Cape Cod, we have over a third of the workforce on Cape Cod that lives off the Kenny. Think about that. Think about, as we try to advance our climate goals, what that's like. And quite honestly, many communities on the Cape cannot find workers who are able or willing to do that, to drive that far to come to work. As I said, the great teacher, or DPW worker, was somebody who supports the travel and tourism industries that are the backbone of the Cape's economy. And so if we don't create more housing in those places, functioning of our communities is at risk. And we hear it from hospital CEOs, if you've had a loved one that's gone into an emergency room and experienced a 4 or 5 hour wait to be seen in an emergency room or to be admitted, thank the housing crisis. Because the housing crisis is often responsible for those delays in services. If we see restaurants, shrink their hours because they can't get enough employees to fill the full shifts. And our CEOs across the board talk to us often about the fact that they are not able to attract and retain the talent that they need to grow and expand their business in Massachusetts. Why? Because they get some talented person who graduated from one of our great colleges and universities. They make an offer. Somebody in North Carolina or Texas or Florida makes an offer. And here, that person's going to spend 50% of their income on housing. And somewhere else, it's 30%. too often people are making the choice to leave, particularly folks who are 25 to 36 years old. That is the biggest part of our demographic that we're losing as a state. And who are those people? Those are the folks who are finishing their education, just getting into their professional lives, often looking to buy their first home, start their families. And there are also folks that we collectively, as a state, invested a lot in their education. And then we're exporting that great talent that we have here in Massachusetts, that brain power, that skilled workforce, exporting it to other parts of the country. That is not a smart public policy. And Massachusetts is a smart state. So we need to align all of our policies so that we can be more competitive. We can retain our share of that talented and skilled workforce so that we can attract and grow our businesses. You know, it's so important that people understand the housing crisis is not just the crisis with the person who's homeless or the person who's housing insecure. Again, you may own your own home. You may live comfortably and able to cover your rent, but you are impacted by the housing crisis, whether it be the impact on the emergency room or the fact that businesses cannot grow and expand and they leave and go somewhere else. And then the local property taxpayer has to pick up that share of the tax burden because businesses back up and leave or cannot expand in here. So there is no escaping this. We're all in this together in terms of this housing crisis. And it is so critically important. I use this line all the time, but I think it's so true. Now, 3 or 4 years ago, when we were in the middle of the pandemic, how many people put a card in the window of their business or their home, signifying how much we appreciate them, the essential workers, the people who worked in the supermarkets, the people who showed up doing the work at the hospitals and the nursing homes, either housekeeping or food service, all the people that kept things running. We appreciated that. We need to make a place for those heroes to live at every new community in the state. And right now, too often, it is impossible for folks to live close to where they work, and that is impacting our competitiveness as a state. So one of the big things we've tried to do to combat this, in addition to creating the first statewide housing plan, unlocking Housing Production Commission, is the Affordable Homes Act, which is the largest housing legislation in Massachusetts. $5.2 billion of authorization that we're spending to support the production and the rehab of housing here in Massachusetts, everything from public housing stock to housing trust fund and other tools that we've used to incent the creation of affordable housing. And that's 49 policy changes, 49 different policy changes. Everything from accessory dwelling units as a right, again, removing barriers to allowing single-family homeowners to add the accessory dwelling unit to their home. That one policy change we estimate will create 8,000 to 10,000 units of housing over the next 5 years. California's done that. All of the other 5 New England states have already done that, and they've seen it's a perfect strategy, really, to gently add housing across communities from the state. No costly come loss. Property owners decide that it makes sense for them. It could be an older couple who are on a fixed income who want to bring in a little additional income to keep up with their taxes and their insurance payment. They add a unit. They rent it out to a college student or a young professional. Or often it's a family member. It's an elderly parent or a disabled child, and you want to be able to keep care for, but also create some independence. There are a lot of opportunities that they could be used, and that one policy chair would think there's a huge opportunity for Massachusetts. We just did the initial listening session as a get ready to put guidelines out. 850 people, including many local community leaders, got on that call. So we know there's huge interest and huge demand for that beyond change. Creating the first office of fair housing district, the state, in our new secretary, to make sure that we're educating folks about their rights and responsibilities around fair housing. Seasonal communities designation, helping places like Cape Cod and the islands, the Berkshires, some communities that have half of their properties owned as second homeowners. Folks who live in New York, they're all home in the Berkshires or somewhere else, they're all at home on Cape Cod or the islands, that have kind of changed the whole of opportunity for like employees, municipal employees, and other folks to have rental opportunities. The proliferation of the formal rental properties in some of these seasonal communities that have been turned into short-term rentals. So the place that the second grade teacher used to rent at a reasonable income, a reasonable rent, has been turned into a short-term rental, and there's nowhere to go. And that's why folks are moving further west. So the seasonal communities designation is an opportunity to really help with the unique needs of those communities. So new tax credits, doubling the historic tax credits from $55 million a year to $110 million a year. We think that's important for a lot of communities like Lowell, that's historic buildings, that they outlive their previous useful life, either as a mill or as a office building, and might be the perfect location to really transition to housing, but we know it could be more expensive, and we're going to need to consider control for that tool cost. Often these historic tax credits from the state that are often matched by the federal government are part of the strategy to help convert those historic buildings, save those historic buildings, but create much needed housing. There's also a new tax credit for the conversion of formerly commercial properties to residential. So that could be an office building, but it also could be an old mall. It could be another kind of commercial space that's outused its useful life as a commercial entity, but is located near transportation, near infrastructure, near where you want density, feet on the street that's going to support retail. And that conversion, we want to support those efforts with the new tax credit for the conversion of commercial to residential. So there's an awful lot of new resources from the Commonwealth that we are bringing to support the activities in communities. We want to bring a plan that helps bring the urgency and usable development of the state to talk about the importance to our collective competitiveness of the state. And we want to partner with our local communities as they grapple with the MBTA community law or any other changes that you're looking at to unlock the opportunities to create more housing, to meet the needs of your communities, to meet the needs of the people who make your communities work and functional every day. So we will continue to partner with all of you. I appreciate the fact that you're coming together to kind of strategize and learn from each other and put your collective wisdom behind this effort at helping Massachusetts navigate our way out of this housing crisis. I am reminded of the line of Rahm Emanuel, the former chief of staff to President Obama, once said that the crisis is a horrible thing to waste. We have a housing crisis. We are, I think, trying to suggest changes that we, so far working with our legislative partners, have gotten some big changes that maybe if it wasn't the crisis it is right now, we would be able to move forward. So we're trying to seize this opportunity to really leverage all of the good ideas, the best practices to move the needle in the summer's crisis. So thank you for having me tonight. I look forward to working with you all and have a good discussion.
Thank you so much, Secretary. Actually, we have a few questions for you, if it's okay. So first, thank you so much for your remarks, and particularly all that you're doing and all of the resources that you're bringing to the table. So with that, with the recent passage of the Affordable Homes Act, what can communities, organizations, and agencies across the Greater Lowell region expect to see in terms of specific impacts and resources to address housing affordability, increase production, and also support zoning amendments?
So I'd say, I mentioned a few of the policy changes, as I mentioned, 49 with policy changes. We start multiple kind of work streams to create guidelines or regs that take, the changes in law and turn them into functional policy. And so we're in the process right now of going through and drafting these guidelines and regs. And so this is an important opportunity, I think, for all of you. If you're interested in ADUs, if you have questions about ADUs, or any of the tax studies that I mentioned, or the other parts of the Affordable Homes Act, send those questions in to us. There's a site on our website that really solicits those questions. What are you wondering about? Hey, I've heard about this policy change. You know, how would it apply to this? I'll give you one example. I had somebody, a meeting I was at, and said, hey, this tax credits for the commercial to residential conversion, can you use it if you tear down the commercial building and use it on the property? That's something we hadn't thought about, but now we're thinking about that, trying to anticipate that answer. And our goal really, as we draft these governance regs, is to be as flexible as possible. We want these to be tools, and we know the way Lowell may use it may be different than the way Worcester uses it, may be different than Pittsfield uses it, but we want everybody to have as maximum flexibility. So I would just urge folks to take a look at the elements of the Affordable Homes Act. I'm sure many of you are familiar with some of the things that are there. And if you have questions or ways that you are hoping to use some of these tools, send those questions into us, send those suggestions into us as we draft the guidelines. Because what we'll do is we'll publish guidelines for comment period. There'll be an iterative process where people can give us feedback, and then we'll publish the final guidelines. And you want to get this as right as possible. So your feedback right at the beginning will help us do that.
Excellent, thank you. And I will say from personal experience how accessible the HLC team has been. I mean, if anybody has questions or anybody has needs or needs for information, not only is the website full of those resources and referrals, but also just reaching out directly to your team has been phenomenal. So thank you so much for that support.
Thank you for that, Jimmy. I would mention too, if there's towns or organizations that really want to delve a little deeper into this, let us know as well. We've got some of our folks on our policy team. We can set up Zoom calls or more specific conversation with groups to organizations, municipal leaders, folks who want to get into something more details. We're happy to do there as well.
Excellent. A couple more questions. The first one is, as we develop at-home in Greater Lowell, of course, we are mindful of the state's housing plan and what that will mean, and how our communities can best align to the goals that are shaping up as part of the state housing plan, and particularly how they can orient themselves towards policy implementation.
Yeah, so we, in drafting the plan, the statewide housing plan, we did 14 listening sessions across the state, including here in Lowell, from Pittsfield to the Vineyard, and then we did 40 kind of focused listening sessions with business leaders, with, you know, all sorts of different groups. So we've had about 3,000 people participate, not in all of those listening sessions. So we tried to do as much kind of engagement and outreach to make sure the plan reflected every kind of diversity in Massachusetts, from what are the needs for seniors, what are the needs for folks with young families, what are the needs for folks with extremely low income, what are the needs for folks with disability issues. So really making sure that we have a plan that reflects the needs and the inputters from all of Massachusetts. And then we're really doing a lot around studying demographic trends and data so that we're anticipating, you know, what are the future growth areas, where population growth, what kind of population is growing. And our hope is to create some regional production goals, you know, for different areas around the state regionally. What do we need to be producing in terms of senior housing to keep up with what we're projecting is going to be this population reached, or an aging population, and do that across the state. So my hope is that the housing plan lays out, you know, what the state thinks we need in terms of housing, but then local communities also put together with their housing plans, their local housing production plans, and we want to really see those plans align with the state plan, so we're all pulling in the same direction. And my hope is, many of you are housing advocates, you're trying to build more housing, you're trying to make the case in your communities to work the need of more housing. And we're hopeful that this state plan becomes true, that's filled with data and information that you can refer to, and not just make the case based on anecdote, but make it on data. Where are we going to be? What are the pressures going to be on our economy, on our local communities if we don't keep up with the need to win more housing based on where we're going to be population-wise? So we're hoping that this becomes a tool that you can use as you're making decisions and discussing changes happening in the level in terms of housing.
Excellent. And the last question, which really is a great dovetail to your answer, is, in addition to many wonderful community leaders, so whether from actual, municipal leaders, we also have many folks here who are representing really important community-based organizations, and particularly those who are developing housing or working as service providers to people in our community who currently do not have access to housing, or are at risk of losing housing, or are dealing with fair housing issues. So can you just a little bit more on how those organizations can intersect with these great efforts, and what they might expect to anticipate as a result from not just the state housing plan, but also from the Affordable Goods Act?
Yeah, we try to, again, put a lot of new tools in the toolbox. So there's a $200 million commitment over the next 5 years around supportive housing. We know that many of the folks who struggle with homelessness or substance abuse disorder, or even some of our seniors, often need supports in order to stay housed and not have to either go into a nursing home if you're a senior, or fall back into homelessness or at the risk. So we really are trying to support not only the construction of that housing, but providing resources to the supportive services that allow folks to stay housed. Those are the kind of innovations that we're trying to create in the affordable homes. You'll figure out in your local communities where it works, how it works. The not-for-profit partners who are working with various populations will know how to use these new tools to put together solutions that work in your community. But our goal is to bring more of those resources to the table. I think it's also important too. I know, it could be a town meeting, could be a planning board, could be a city council meeting where there's a discussion going on around housing. And many of us who are housing advocates show up, and people expect us to show up and say, what's important. But sometimes it's important for the folks that they don't always expect to show up to add to their voice. So if you're an important not-for-profit who maybe is providing food pantry services or other things, and you really need to have housing that your employees, your volunteers can really support your organization as that organization supports the community, coming and talking about the threat of not having enough affordable housing in order to maintain the important services that you provide. I think that's an important perspective that communities need to think about and hear about, because, the folks who are against any particular project or any particular change in housing, they always show up. No problem there. They're always there. They always go through other reasons why. Oh, it's a good idea, it's not here, not now, it's only why it can't happen. The question is, are the rest of us going to show up and filter down that? I can talk about the many ways and reasons why it needs to happen and needs to happen now. Because there's a lot of folks who are housing insecure, or organizations or businesses or others that are just hanging on and won't be able to continue to grow and provide services or the tax benefit if we don't provide a workforce that keeps them functioning to be able to live proximity to get including those things.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Secretary. I don't have any further questions for you. Thank you so much for inspiring us to act on this mission.